state of Alabama. Thank you, and welcome. And let me say at the outset, and I know everybody's so excited, and I am too, but we have to, again, acknowledge the tragedy that occurred in Las Vegas, and our hearts and our prayers go to the victims, and our thanks go to the first responders for putting their lives on the line, and probably save so many more. I also want to thank my pastor and friend Dale Coyne for his words and his thoughts for the people that are hurting today. But I want to thank Anthony Daniels. Representative Daniels is one of the game changers in this state, folks. Watch him and watch. And I want to thank Joe Biden's in the house. Let me take just a minute. I want to tell you. Just a minute before Joe gets up to tell you a little bit about me, why I'm running, and why this race is so important. As Leader Daniels said, I grew up in Fairfield, just a few miles from here. You know, son of a steel worker, a grandson of a steel worker and a coal miner. And I learned from those parents and grandparents the values that I hope to bring to the U.S. Senate. It's the values Joe Biden brought to the U.S. Senate and to the office of the Vice President. And character, something that we desperately need in the state of Alabama. I have, over the last years of my career, fought for civil rights. I have fought for women's rights. I have done everything I can to fight for equality for every person in the state. To bring those values to the Senate, to bring those Alabama values. That's the real Alabama.
Yes! Yes!
I want to bring those and talk about the kitchen table issues, the issues that you talk about with your significant other, your spouse, your children, about the affordable health care, to try to make sure we have a health care for everyone. That people don't have to go into the bankruptcy court to pay medical bills. That single moms don't have to take their children to the emergency room for routine health care. That we can keep our rural hospitals open. We want to fight to make sure retirements are protected in Medicaid and Medicare. I want to make sure that our seniors are protected. My mom's here today, and it's personal, folks. I got to tell you, I took those same values to the United States Attorney's Office, where we coordinated a task force that convicted Eric Rudolph for bombing a women's clinic. We investigated the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. I promise I'm going to take those values to Washington, D.C.
Yes.
You know, they have told me time and again that this race is a long shot. Well, folks, it's not the first time I've heard it's something I want to do and that I feel passionate about. It's a long shot. They told me in 1997 when I became U.S. Attorney that prosecuting a case that was almost 40 years old is a long shot. But you know what?
You did it.
When you were on the right side of history,
yes. Many of you that this campaign is on the right side of history. We are on the right side of justice. We're on the right side of respect and fairness. And I can tell you, Roy Moore is not on the right side of any of that. I want to make sure that when I'm elected, my turn.
Yes!
Very simple. You do that by following your oath of office.
Right.
You do that by following the duties of the people that elected you. You do it by obeying the rule of law. This is so exciting for Louise and my family. We appreciate it so much. We can win this race, and we can win it because of your help. I need your help. I need you calling. I need you writing. I need you sending money. I need you to do all of those things for this campaign and spread the word. Talk to your friends, but talk to them. You know that from the very beginning that we have talked in this race that our mantra is about dialogues. Engage people in those dialogues. Don't talk to them. Don't criticize. Talk to them about the issues, the very issues that we're talking about. And with your help and with you in my corner, we can win this race on December the 12th. Elected to the U.S. Senate when he was 30 years old, became the 47th Vice President of the United States. Together for so many issues over the years. He has stood for the same civil rights issues. He has stood for those women's issues especially, and still standing when it comes to the sexual assaults of women on college campuses. He is also the kind of leader and public servant who is selfless and committed and principled, the kind of guy who can sit down with world leaders across the globe and talk about international and national security, and at the same time come to Alabama and sit down across a kitchen table and talk about health care and wages and a living wage and education and the things that we're going to talk about in this race. Joe has been a role model for so many people. He has been a role model for me in many ways.
My name is Joe Biden, and I've been working with Doug Jones a long time. Folks, it's good to be here campaigning with Doug. Doug and I go back a long way. We go back to when I was just elected. I was 29 years old. I had to wait a total of 17 days to be eligible to be sworn in. I've been around so damn long, I knew John Sparkman. I served with him. And even though I was much senior to him, I never felt that way to Hal Heflin. Look, I've campaigned for an awful lot of candidates over the years. It's been my great privilege to campaign for candidates all across the country, literally in every state in the nation. And I can tell you that not all candidates are created equal. I can say to Louie Ledbetter, who's a great friend of mine, that she's going out and she's campaigning for all these folks, that, you know, I can count on two hands the people that I've campaigned for that have as much integrity, as much courage, and a sense of honor and duty that Doug does. He's had it since, really, he's had it since he's been a kid. Well, I say a kid, since he was in law school. And that's a kid. No, I really mean it. I've watched him. I've seen him. And Doug knew that if he ran, he didn't say it, but he knew I'd be here if he wanted me to be. But it reminded me of the story I want to tell you. In 1978, I was running for re-election. I was all of 35 years old, running for my second term. And we were very late in the session. We didn't go out. We were trying to close down the Senate, adjourn, as Holly said, sine die. So when we're trying to get out, we have these round robin votes all the time, and we didn't go out until about 10 days before the election day. And what happens is the senators, Democrat and Republican, they go down to the Senate dining room about 4 o'clock, and they get a bowl of soup, or me a bowl of ice cream or whatever. And all kidding aside, so we were waiting for the Senate to close down the day before it closed down, and I walked down, and I was flunking what I call the slope of the shoulder test. You can always tell how well a candidate's doing when you say to them, "How's it going?" They say, "Oh, we're really doing well." The guy or woman who's winning is the one that says, "I don't know, it's really a tough race." So I walked in, and old James O. East of Mississippi was the chairman of my committee, the Judiciary Committee at the time, and he was having supper with Herman Talmadge, to talk at you like this. Well, I'm not making fun, by the way. Any of you know the state of Delaware. The southern two-thirds of my state is southern, the Delmarva Peninsula. They talk funny like y'all do too, you know what I mean? Not a joke. Anyway, so I walked in, and I guess I was flunking the slope of the shoulder test. I went over to the corner table to get something to eat. And James O. Eastland, he always used to be able to have some smoke in those days in the Senate. And he had a big old cigar about as big as this microphone. And he took it out, and he said, he never called me senator. He always called me son. He said, "Son, come over here, sit down here." So I walked over, he said, "What's the matter?" And I told him how tough the race was. I won't go into the detail about it. And he looked at me and said, "What old Jim Easton do for you in Delaware?" I said, "Well, some places you'd help, Mr. Chairman, and some places you hurt." And he went like this. "Well, I'll come to Delaware and campaign for you or against you, whichever will help the most." I promised Doug I'd campaign for him or against him, whichever will help the most. The system needs today. Amen. No, I really mean this. It's become so nasty, so mean-spirited, such a mean-spirited political environment. Even in the days when I got there, the Democratic Party still had 7 or 8 old-fashioned Democratic segregationists. You'd get up and you'd argue like the devil with them. Then you'd go down and have lunch or dinner together. The political system worked. We were divided on issues, but the political system worked. But today, it is terrible. Today, everything is a personal attack. You can't reach a consensus when you start off a discussion attacking the other person's motive. You can't say you're in the pocket of, or you're unethical, or it's hard to get to go after that. I learned that lesson from another Southern senator I had fundamental disagreements with. I walked on the floor one day, and there was a guy named Jesse Helms standing up excoriating a Republican friend of mine to this day, Bob Dole, a conservative Republican, one of my close friends, as well as Ted Kennedy. They had introduced a thing called the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Jesse Helms was standing up there going after them, saying it wasn't the business of government, we had no obligation, etc. And I had to go into a meeting with the majority leader because I had just lost my wife and daughter in an automobile accident. And I didn't want to go to the Senate. I agreed to come for 6 months. Some of the senior senators said, "Come down for 6 months." And I got an assignment once a week from the majority leader. I thought all senators got assignments. I really did. No senator gets an assignment. No, I really mean it. But I realized after about 2 months that he was just taking my pulse, see how it was doing. So I walked in and sat in front of Mike Mansfield, who every Democrat and Republican tell you had more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their whole body. And I sat across him. I always had a corncob pipe. I hardly ever lighted. They would chew on it. And he looked at me and he said, "What's the matter, Joe?" And I told him, I went on about Jesse Helms. I said, he has no social redeeming value. I really went after him. And he looked at me and he said, "Joe, most important lesson I ever learned in the Senate." And this guy knows it in his bones. He looked at me and said, "Joe, what would you say if I told you 2 years ago, sitting in Raleigh, Dot and Jesse Helms saw an advertisement in the Raleigh Observer of a young man in braces, steel braces up to his hips, with steel crutches. All the advertisement in the paper said was, all I want for Christmas is someone to love me and take me home. He said, what would you say, Joe, if I told you Dot and Jesse Helms adopted that young man as their own? I said, I'd feel like a fool. He said, well, they did. He said, Joe, I learned a long time ago, it's always appropriate to question another man or woman's judgment. But it's never appropriate to question their motive because you don't know. Folks, there's a reason why every time there was a crisis on Capitol Hill, I'd get sent up. Because I never questioned the motive, as obvious as it may seem to me, of the opposition. They knew I respected them, and I, like hammer and tong, disagreed on the issues. But we were able to get some things done because they trusted me. I didn't agree with them at all, but they trusted me. That's what this guy will bring. He will bring a sense of treating everybody, not a joke, everybody, with dignity and respect. You know, character, the definition of character, by an old English poet was, character is little more than the lengthened shadow of a man. Or they'd say today, man or woman. A lengthened shadow of a person. And this man has cast, in his young years, a very significant shadow. My mother used to say the most important virtue was courage. Because without courage, none of the other virtues are able to be practiced. Doug has demonstrated his courage and his absolute integrity. Doug and I have been friends for a long, long time, as I said. Doug knows Alabama. He knows your heart. And he'll never let you down. The good feeling in this room, the good feeling in this campaign that I just had today, is real. You have your shoulders back. You know why you're for this man. It gives you reason to believe a little again. Young U.S. attorney, which I'm proud to say I had a little bit to have to do with Heflin. Actually, it was Howell Heflin. But for 40 years, I know you've heard it 1,000 times, but 40 years, justice had gone undone. 16th Street Baptist Church, 4 girls. I understand some of the families, one of the survivors are here today. I'm not sure where they are. I'm looking forward to meeting you all. God love you. God love you. And by the way, it's not easy for them to be here because I've lost 2 children. And I want to tell you, as worthy as it is when they're honored or recognized, it brings it all back like it happened yesterday. You relive it. So I want to thank you for your courage of being here. I know. What Doug did wasn't just for those families. Doug helped remove 40 years of stain and pain from the state.
Yes. Yes.
40 years. The state has changed.
Woo!
Doug said no more. And the Klan needed to know that justice would follow them to the gates of hell if needed. Yes. His heart. Justice was delayed, but it could not be denied. And anyone who knew this man was not at all surprised. As was mentioned earlier, the son of a steel worker, the grandson of a steel worker, who knows what it's like for a community to have its heart ripped out. When I first came here, this was a steel town. My dad used to say, I went through the same thing. My dad was from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Coal died. I was 9 years old. I remember my dad, the longest walk a parent ever has to make is up a short flight of stairs to tell their kid, honey, you can't go back to that school next year. You can't play in the Little League team. We can't live here anymore, honey. Daddy's lost the house. I remember I was much older to walk over to his father-in-law and my mother's 4 brothers, 3 of whom survived the war, and say, Ambrose, can I leave Jean and the kids with you? I promise I'll pay you back. I promise I'll be back. But there's jobs down in Wilmington, Delaware, where my brother is. And I remember him sitting on the edge of the bed telling me that. And saying, Joey, it's only 157 miles. I try to come home every weekend. But he looked at me. And I vividly remember this. I was 3rd grade. And said, but Joey, it's going to be all right. Because there used to be a level playing field. He believed it. And he made me believe it. Every time after we moved to Delaware, my 2 brothers and sister and I'm the oldest, every time there was a recession, somebody in my family or one of our neighbors lost a job.